appear to have been claiming far more for council tax than they were actually paying to their local councils. It would appear that they've set up systems whereby they were receiving regular monthly payments from the Commons authorities for their council tax provision of their additional cost allowance, but when it came to looking at the actual bills they had to pay to their councils, the amount was far smaller. Some of them, it's to the order of thousands of pounds extra that they have ended up with that they shouldn't have, and others it's a few £100s. But clearly there is something wrong with the system that allows so many MPs to effectively make a profit on their claims for their council tax.
And what have their responses been to this?
Some have sort of promised to look at it and say that they should repay. Others have refused to comment. It's still the early stages. I think it'll be up to the individual MPs themselves to explain quite how they got into that position. I think most of us have a vague idea how much our council tax bills are, and if we were to be making claims for them on a monthly basis, we'd be able to do the maths to work out whether it's roughly the right number. I think people out there will be genuinely surprised that yet again MPs find themselves in a position where they're having to explain away as mistakes things that people out there might find it a bit more difficult to explain away.
The Commons, of course, have released expenses claims now in black and white, much more black than white. Tomorrow you've brought out this supplement, haven't you, the complete expenses files. I've got a copy here, an index, pictures and all the details. Is that now it, as far as the Telegraph is concerned and this CD? Have you trawled through all the information on that?
It's certainly true to say that, we've been working on this for, 6 weeks now, and the amount of information, the sheer volume of paperwork is huge, and there's still lots of work to be done on it,
so
and we will carry on doing
There's more
that.
information on that CD which you haven't been through yet.
Well, if you think about the panoply of MPs' expenses, we've been looking mainly at the additional cost allowance, the so-called second homes allowance, but there are different provisions for a communications allowance, for office costs and for other claims, and all those provide hundreds and hundreds of pages of details for every MP that need to be looked at, and you can rest assured that we will carry on looking at it. But I think tomorrow what we're marking is really a kind of summary of what all 646 MPs have claimed in a handy magazine format so that people can look at it. And the other thing that we're doing, because the House of Commons has signally failed to do it, is in the coming days and weeks we'll be putting online all the documents relevant to every MP so that people can look at the documents uncensored. The House of Commons has produced them with lots of black all over it. We'll be putting out the real documents so that people can judge for themselves what our MPs have been up to.
6-week campaign, you've led the agenda. What sort of sales have you put on?
Certainly we've sold more copies. People have been keen to find out about this. I think what I've been struck by is the volume of correspondence that the Telegraph has been receiving. We've been receiving more than 1,000 letters a day, which is off the scale for newspapers, from readers who are both angry but also who care passionately about Britain's parliamentary system and who really want to see change. And I think really when they looked yesterday at the House of Commons publishing a sea of black ink, they will have felt that in the 6 weeks that the Telegraph has been working on this, not as much progress towards transparency has been made as perhaps the Prime Minister, David Cameron, and others would like us to believe.
So the next time you're offered a story for £100,000, you'll look at it very carefully, will you?
We make judgments as journalists every time somebody brings us a story about whether it's worthwhile, and from the beginning we looked at this very carefully, we thought about it long and hard, and we satisfied ourselves that, this information, not only was it genuine, but it was certainly in the public interest. And I think there isn't a single person now who wouldn't agree that this was something that has been necessary for politics, and it's a great shame that the House of Commons to this day is still dragging its feet about making available information that you, me, and the people who are watching this want to know.
So £100,000 well spent?
You're speculating about the sum of money and whether or not we paid for it and all that. I leave that to you.
You're denying you paid for it?
I'm neither confirming nor denying. I've answered this question quite a few times on your programme and others. So the fact is, you're a journalist, I'm a journalist, and you know that journalists, what they never do is talk about their sources. In a funny way, MPs try to make that a subject.
You've named your source, Mr. Brogan.
We may have done, but the point is the process about how we came to have this information is neither here nor there. What really mattered is the information genuine? It patently was. And is it of interest? Is it of public interest? And it was. And the fact is that the House of Commons has had 6 weeks now to put all this information together, to produce it.
The interesting point at the start was whether you were paying for what some people allege was stolen property, and that figure of £100,000 keeps on coming around. That was a legitimate line of questioning, surely.
Of course, but the thing is, it's a line of questioning that we heard a lot about in the the early days, MPs tried to get that idea up and running. Let's talk about how the Telegraph did this, because that was a way of getting off the subject about what our MPs, the people we elect to represent us, have been doing with our money. But for 6 weeks now, I think people have seen for themselves that we can have all kinds of interesting arguments about how the Telegraph came about this and how we put it together. But really, I'm finding from the letters we've been getting that people are less interested in that and are far more interested in knowing what our MPs are going to do to make the system better and what we as a country are going to do to reform our politics in the light of what is clearly a complete lack of transparency at Westminster.
Okay.